And this is a saucy one. Oh, producer Harry's getting frisky here.
Harry does a good job with these hot takes.
Apparently, fellas, all is not right in Philadelphia, and I think this is actually a fair point.
Mm.
Despite being 4-0, the cracks in the team showed in their overtime close call against the Commanders. True that. And again, this is another example of a team, for some reason, that can't beat their opponent. In this case, Philly seems to struggle with Washington. Last year, I think Philly started 8-0 and Washington beat them in Philadelphia. Luckily, as Harry notes, the McLaurin catch was ruled out of bounds. No call on a false start. It's almost like Harry's a Commanders fan, but he's not. He's a Dolphins fan. No call on the false start on the tush push, and we heard our buddy and boss EK talk about that. He is a Washington fan, in fact, and that led to the game-winning field goal in overtime. Breach, should we be at all concerned? We've talked about all these teams that are successful. We talked about the Chiefs. We talked about the Bills. Any concern about the Eagles, who are 4-0 but have done it in a pretty ugly manner week in and week out?
I would just say their offense hasn't looked as good as it did last year. They're not as much. I mean, they were a high-powered machine last year that just was running over everyone. And so now you've had defensive coordinators that have had an offseason to kind of try and figure out how to slow it down. And
you lost your offensive coordinator too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so I do think they've taken a small step back, but doesn't mean that that's anything that's going to last. They might get better as the season goes on. But I think part of it has to do with the fact that Jalen Hurts just doesn't look as accurate as he has in the past. I mean, he just seems slightly off, but he's still putting up fantastic numbers and they're still undefeated. So it hasn't been a huge deal. But I think did he have an interception today? He did not, but he has 3 interceptions through 4 games. He only threw 6 interceptions all last season. So it's just a little less accurate with his throws. But hey, look, they're winning, and that's all that matters.
So, Brenton, is this
we're just worth noting with Hurts too? He had he's carried the ball 31 times through. Or how many times did he carry? He had 9. So he's got 40 carries. He's averaging 10 carries per game through the first 4 weeks of the season. Last year he was up to like 12, and he had. I also think the schedule plays into this a lot too. Like the Eagles had a really easy schedule last year, easiest in the league, as Breach noted, and they took advantage of it and piled up W's early and often, and they're still doing that. But Hurts does just look a little bit off, I think.
Is this a situation where Frank Reich leaves and Doug Peterson takes over and it's not the same? Is this in terms of Shane Steichen leaving for the Colts job and Brian Johnson, first-year coordinator, sort of feeling his way through this, even though he's been on staff? Because to your point, it doesn't feel like things are clicking play calling wise, but they're 4-0, they're finding ways to win. And maybe they, to Breach's point, figure it out as they work through this together.
I think it's probably more the second portion of it. I feel like Sirianni called. I feel like he calls the plays.
No, I think Brian Johnson calls the plays.
Oh, yeah, Brian Johnson. Okay, Brian Johnson. Okay, well, was Steichen calling all the plays last year? I guess you can't.
Pretty sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what it is then, right? Like, it's not dissimilar to what you saw when Brian Daboll left Buffalo for the Giants and Ken Dorsey takes over, and you have faith in the guy, you expect him, and like Dorsey's been much better this second year, so I think that's probably a big factor there.
The big irony is that Brian Daboll, according to the Giants fan, has been way worse, whether it's him or Mike Kafka calling plays. They want both of them to quit calling plays, so it's a weird thing, but let me ask you this, Breach. You know that San Francisco's number 1 in the NFC? Who's number 2? You taking Dallas over Philly? You rolling with Philly? Going some other direction?
I'm gonna roll with Philly. They're undefeated. They're beating everyone. Look, I like the Lions. I like the Cowboys. Those would be my top 4.
Detroit Lions.
Eagles at 2.
All right.
And by the way, Brian Johnson, first year 2021 as a NFL coach. I've been in college. I've been a coordinator, offensive coordinator at 3 different spots: Utah, Houston, and Florida. Each for I think 1 year, maybe 2 years at Utah, where he's the coordinator. It's a whole different ballgame when you're calling plays in like those sort of in those college offenses versus doing in the NFL. And so I think definitely some adjustment there.